What if I told you that a tariff meant to punish Russia might end up hurting China more than anyone else, and that something as distant as oil tankers in the Black Sea could double the price of your iPhone or your kids' school supplies? It sounds dramatic, but it's already in motion. Welcome to China Decoded. Let's break it down. A major move has just been made on the global chessboard, and its shockwaves are only beginning to be felt. Just this week, the United States administration issued an executive order imposing a new 25% tariff on all goods coming from India. When you add that to the existing tariffs, it brings the total to a staggering 50%. The official reason given, and I'm quoting the order directly, is that the US has found India to be directly or indirectly importing petroleum from the Russian Federation. Now, this isn't just another trade dispute. This is the first major application of a powerful and highly controversial economic tool. Think of it less as a tariff and more as an ultimatum being sent to the rest of the world. So, what is this new strategy? How will it impact key global players like the EU and most critically China? And what does it tell us about the future of the global economy? Let's connect the dots. To understand what's happening, we first need to grasp the strategy at play here. This isn't a standard tariff designed to protect a domestic industry. This is what analysts call a secondary sanction, or a secondary tariff. Here's what that means in simple terms. A primary sanction targets a specific country, in this case, Russia. But a secondary sanction targets any third country that continues to do business with the primary target. The stated goal is to cut off the financial lifelines that support Russia's military operations, specifically its revenue from oil and gas exports. The administration has made it clear, if the conflict in Ukraine doesn't see a ceasefire by their deadline, this tool will be deployed against any nation trading with Russia. This puts countries in a very difficult position. It effectively forces them to make a choice. Do business with Russia, or do business with the United States, the world's largest consumer market. That's a choice with massive economic consequences. And India was the first to find out just how serious Washington is. So let's look at the real-world impact. First, India. For years, India has carefully balanced its relationships with both the West and Russia. Since 2022, it's become the second largest buyer of Russian seaborne crude oil, often securing it at a discount. The Indian government has defended this, stating its energy policy is dictated by the needs of its own market. But here's where it gets interesting. At the exact same time, major US companies like Apple have been accelerating a shift in their supply chains, moving iPhone production for the American market out of China and into India. Now, with a 50% tariff, the entire calculation changes. The cost of importing those Indian-made iPhones into the US could effectively double. This isn't just a number on a government document. That's a cost that will almost certainly be passed on to the American consumer. So, the first ripple effect is clear. A direct challenge to one of the world's fastest-growing economies, and a potential disruption to a key plank of the de-risking from China strategy. Now, let's turn to the European Union. The EU and the US have the largest bilateral trade relationship in the world. But there's a problem. Despite significantly reducing their dependence, several EU nations still import Russian energy, particularly liquefied natural gas. The European Commission has a plan to be fully independent of Russian energy, but not until 2027. A 100% secondary tariff, if applied before then, would put this massive trade relationship in jeopardy. Let's look at the stakes here. The EU's main exports to the US aren't just consumer goods. They are high-value products like pharmaceuticals and specialized machinery. These are things that are very difficult to source from anywhere else. The impact wouldn't just be higher prices, it could be genuine shortages of critical goods. It's a situation that puts Washington and Brussels in a potential bind, and that brings us to the main event, China. China is by far the single largest buyer of Russian oil and gas. The strategic partnership between Beijing and Moscow has deepened significantly in recent years. This makes China the ultimate target of any global secondary tariff policy. So let's build an evidence chain here to understand the pressure Beijing is facing. Fact number 1. The US-China trade relationship is already under severe strain. Recent data from the US Commerce Department is striking. The US trade deficit with China just hit a 21-year low. Imports from China in June fell to their lowest level since the 2009 financial crisis. This isn't a prediction. A significant economic decoupling is already happening. Fact number 2. China's domestic economy is navigating its own set of challenges. We've discussed this before on the channel. A struggling property sector, challenges in manufacturing, and record youth unemployment. These are not just abstract data points. They represent real, tangible domestic pressures on the leadership in Beijing. Fact number 3. A 100% tariff would be unlike anything seen before. Remember the trade war? The tariffs then were mostly in the 25% range. A 100% tariff isn't a tool of negotiation. It's a tool designed to effectively halt trade. We're talking about everything from electronics and clothing to toys and furniture. This creates what one trade expert, Simon Evanet at the IMD Business School, called a very difficult situation. He notes that given the close political alignment between Xi and Putin, forcing Beijing to break with Moscow would require an extraordinary amount of pressure. So, when you see these pieces on the board, a US-China trade relationship already at a historic low, significant headwinds in China's own economy, and now the looming threat of a tariff designed to stop trade cold. You have to ask, does this paint a picture of a simple trade dispute, or does it suggest a fundamental strategic confrontation is entering a new, more dangerous phase? And this brings us to the final and perhaps most important point. This policy isn't happening in a vacuum. It's accelerating a trend that is already redrawing the global economic map. The Yale Budget Lab recently calculated that these new tariffs could push the average US tariff rate to over 18%. To put that in perspective, that would be the highest level seen since 1934. What we are witnessing is a move away from the globalized system of the last 40 years, where efficiency and cost were the primary drivers. The new logic is driven by national security and geopolitical alignment. This forces every international company to reevaluate its supply chains, not based on what's cheapest, but on what's safest politically. So, let's summarize. 1. A powerful new economic weapon, the secondary tariff, has been deployed, with India as its first major test case. 2. This creates immense pressure on other key US partners, like the EU, who still have economic ties to Russia. And 3. It places China, Russia's most important economic partner, in a profound strategic dilemma at a time when its own economy is under pressure and its trade with the US is already collapsing. The old rules of global trade are being systematically dismantled. The question is no longer if the world is fracturing into competing economic blocs, but how quickly those fractures will spread. And as this policy rolls out, every nation will be forced to decide where it stands. The lines on the map are being redrawn, not with armies, but with tariffs. And that may prove to be the most significant geopolitical story of our time. If this analysis helped you understand the deeper game behind global finance, make sure to like and subscribe, because in a world of noise, this is your intelligence signal. That's all for today on China Decoded. Thanks for watching. Behind the slogans, beyond the surface. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. See you in the next one.